It's very satisfying to ship a product to someone because you're solving their problem. And when they say thank you, because you've completely unblocked their research, or you're enabling them to make a new product or do something great, and then they give you money as well as saying thank you, it's kind of addictive.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host Paul Spain, and great to have Ben O'Brien joining us for the first time. How are you, Ben?
Great, really great to be here, Paul.
Yeah, look, fantastic to have you joining us for this, our virtually Christmas Eve episode. In fact,
Christmas Eve.
We're recording on Christmas Eve, but yeah, a lot of people will probably be listening in Christmas Eve. The audio tends to go up a little bit later than the live stream, but there are obviously folks who'll catch the live stream and so on as well. Maybe you can introduce listeners to where you fit into this big wide world of tech, entrepreneurships, startups, and
awesome.
the like.
Yeah, so my name's Ben O'Brien. I'm an engineer originally. I did a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechatronics and a PhD in Bioengineering. 2012, I started a company called StretchSense. We were focused on making super soft, stretchable sensors for measuring human body motion. I was co-founder, CEO for about 11 years, stepped down a couple of years ago. These days, I'm working on writing a book on entrepreneurship that explores really hard situations that entrepreneurs find themselves in. And I'm also mentoring founders who want to start companies or have recently started companies.
Fantastic. Now, I should just mention it while you talk. You've mentioned you're writing the book.
Yes.
For folks who are interested in Ben's book, we will mention this again later, but bottomofthecliffbook.com
yes.
is where you can actually go to register interest if you'd like to hear about that when it comes out. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Now, big thank you, of course, to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, Workday, and Gorilla Technology for keeping us streaming and on the air, all those sorts of things. And a little reminder, or if you haven't heard it before, we are doing a little survey and giveaway at the moment. This gives us a bit of your feedback so we can look at what can we do to improve the New Zealand Tech Podcast. You can complete it probably in about 60 seconds, depending on if you want to write a whole lot or whether you just want to tick a few boxes. So really quick and easy. And we've got some giveaways there. 1NZ Warriors jersey, Logitech Casa pop-up desk, which is a little portable kind of keyboard, trackpad, and stand for a laptop.
Wait, all in one?
All in one. That just it's about the size of it's small and light, but sort of similar form factor to a laptop, and then you just fold it all out, and it gives you a nice laptop stand. It's very cool. So there's a couple of those. The Logitech keys to go to, which is a portable keyboard you can hook onto your phone if you need to do some serious typing without having a laptop with you, and the Motorola Edge 60 Fusion smartphone. So some very nice things in there if you would be so kind as to complete the survey. And the other thing it does for us is when we're, I guess, keeping in touch with our partners, and when new partner inquiries come in, it's helpful for us to have a few data points on who our listeners are. So there's one or two things in there as well that help with that feedback. And ultimately, if we have more partners and more sponsors, we have more money to invest back into the show. So good for everybody. All right, and that is at nztechpodcast.com/survey. All right, let's jump in. So starting on the New Zealand front, interesting and concerning to hear around the police in New Zealand leaking some what looks like reasonably critical data in relation to various cases. They regularly will send out criminal case files to lawyers. But you can imagine in a criminal case file, there will be names and details that must be redacted, right? Very serious information of someone who's made an anonymous, complaint to police. Their name, yes, of course, that's going to be documented in the files. But if that makes it through to
not great
criminal, then that is potentially serious. These are the sorts of things where in years gone by, there I think plenty of cases around the world where people have disappeared or what have you in the most serious circumstances. So, yeah, it's shocking to hear that New Zealand Police had a window there of about 2 weeks where whatever their approach to redaction was not working correctly. It reminds me of a scenario we saw with a client some years ago, and they redacted some documents and asked us to help them publish those documents. And we were aware that some people did a form of redaction that was like blacking out the text that you don't want to get to, you don't want to be seen, without recognising that with a PDF you could just highlight the text behind the black and copy and paste it out. So I'm actually incredibly familiar with the fact that these things can go wrong, but for the police to get this wrong, I think is very, very serious. How do you feel about this, Ben?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting lesson in, like, okay, first of all, I feel terrible for anyone that's been affected by this, and also I'm sure there was some IT manager that got the worst phone call of their life when this went wrong. Yeah. But I think the interesting lesson is like, as we move to automate more and more systems, I noticed in the articles that there was some kind of disclosure infrastructure, some piece of software that was responsible for it. What you're doing is you're taking away the ability for people to just see and check with their common sense and their experience of, is the system actually working? So if you go back 50 years when there was a piece of paper and someone had to physically cross it out, right? The person posting that information out, they would have had a pretty good idea of whether it was being properly redacted or not. So you've got humans in the loop checking the quality of systems. But as things become more and more automated, and as it just becomes like click a button, right? Like send file to all, right? Email all, or what have you. All of a sudden, like, people are actually removed from the point of service delivery. And that means that problems like this can get massively inflamed or exaggerated compared to the damage that could have been done in the past. And so I think it's like a really interesting challenge for organizations. Like, I'll give you an example is we put in place once upon a time a customer support line where customers could send in tickets, right?
This is with Stretch Sense?
Yeah, exactly. Many years ago, probably like 10 years ago almost. And then like one of the things that happened was there was some mistake so that support tickets were just getting lost into a void, right? And if you have an automated system like that that's failing, but nobody has visibility on it anymore because you've changed from ticket to email inbox to person looking at it to just straight into Jira or whatever system you've got, problems don't get seen and they can run amok and you have huge problems. So yeah, I guess like to me, this is a cautionary tale. I'm sure there's lots of details, but from a distance, a cautionary tale about the dangers of automation.
Yeah. Now, also on the New Zealand front, heard today via LinkedIn that James Powell, who is co-founder at Dawn Aerospace, has exited the business after 8 years there, and it looks like he's moving on, fairly swiftly into a new role, which no doubt we'll hear about in the not too distant future. So. Yeah, it's quite a big deal. I think Dawn Aerospace is probably, our most well-known aerospace company behind Rocket Lab. What they've done and what James has achieved there, with their space plane and all the other things they've got with environmentally friendly propulsion technologies and so on that they've got out there in space, right now.
And really cool promo videos too.
Yeah, I know. Always awesome, right? So a bit of a changing of the guard, I guess, with James leaving. His brother Powell's still the chief executive there. And of course, we've done some podcasts with him over the years. For folks that are curious to learn a little bit more about Dawn Aerospace, then we do have New Zealand Tech podcast and New Zealand Business podcast episodes, sort of delving in there into Dawn Aerospace. James remains a significant shareholder, and it's going to be really interesting to follow what what Dawn has over the years ahead, but also what James gets up to and whatever he's had his arm twisted into doing, or whatever new thing that he's involved with. So yeah, really, it's so exciting actually just to see New Zealand's growth in the world of aerospace. Also on the aerospace front, we saw Rocket Lab for the first time hit a market cap in New Zealand dollars of over $70 billion, which is an absolutely astounding
70 billion.
astounding number. And this is ahead of them launching Neutron and a whole lot of other things ahead. Obviously, off the back of some pretty big in terms of a very large US contract for the Space Force there, alongside some really big US defence contractors who have also won similar sized contracts. So yeah, very exciting time for aerospace. They achieved 21 launches this year. So last year was 16. So really, that's a pretty sizable
it's crazy.
Step up. And yeah, I imagine 2026 is going to be a really exciting year. Continuing to focus on some pretty big challenges, but pretty exciting for New Zealand. And I've probably mentioned it before, but just in case I didn't, Rocket Lab's book is out now and is a great either for yourself or someone else. It's called The Launch of Rocket Lab. Fantastic book. And by Peter Griffin, one of our great tech journalists and podcasters here in New Zealand. So, yeah, really encourage people to get their hands on that if you can. What I like about this book is it covers the 20-year journey of Rocket Lab, but it's kind of a zoom in on startup life, and there's just so much kind of packed in there that I think anyone has any interest in tech and startups and aerospace and entrepreneurship, you're going to enjoy picking it up. And because Rocket Lab themselves have been involved, it is absolutely packed with pictures from that journey and going back to Pete in his childhood. I think there's earlier years before he started Rocket Lab, there's one with him on a bike that's rocket powered that I think's when back when he's a youngster in Invercargill or something. So there's lots in there.
I mean, I think the thing that's both these two stories, the Dawn Aerospace one and the Rocket Lab story, the thing that's most exciting is you can see multiple generations of founders and companies like recycling into the ecosystem, whether that's through talent or money.
Yes.
And I can remember going back again sort of 15 years, people were saying, hey, we just have to kickstart the ecosystem. We have to get it going such that people can have their experiences, have their lessons, and then bring them back. And if you look at mature ecosystems, that's what happens. You just get this recycling effect. And so it just makes me really happy to see this starting to happen, this kind of flywheel of success.
Yeah, it's so good, so good. And then also on the New Zealand front, we've got news of the government formally announcing that they will centralise digital investment and procurement by the launching of the Government Digital Delivery Agency, April 2026. That will sit under the Public Service Commission, centralising their IT investment and procurement. They're talking around expected savings of $3.9 billion over 5 years. That'll help modernise services, reduce duplication, and improve efficiency. So, yeah, this is something that Minister for Digitising Government, Judith Collins, is, I guess, pushing and making happen. These things are, I always find them fascinating because you can look at them and you can see, wow, there's a bunch of benefits, but there's usually a bunch of challenges as well. And I'm sure some of those, listening in, there will be, some that will be concerned around aspects of, well, you centralise too much. Does that mean that, say, some of the smaller players, get less visibility? Does it slow certain things down? And this idea that, Minister Collins has highlighted, there was a comment in one of the news releases, said taking a centralised approach to digital investment and procurement could save up to 30% on the projected $13 billion technology spend across the public sector in the next 5 years. This means the potential savings of 3.9. That's quite a large chunk. And so interesting to delve into, well, where does that 30% come from? Because there isn't usually necessarily sort of 30% margin in probably most of the things that they're buying that's sort of spare and available, but there can be varying efficiencies and so on. But yeah, it will certainly, I'm sure, lead to some pain for some out there as well. So, happy to hear from anyone. Always interesting to hear feedback. So, feel free to share any thoughts on that. If there's any insights as a listener that you want to share. Any immediate thoughts come to mind for you, Ben?
Yeah, I think this is something that has peril and opportunity. So I think the peril is, like you say, you could freeze smaller players out, right? Potentially the deal just goes to like one big tech contractor and, that's done. You've also got like centralization of all services under one system means that if that system fails, it's, not just the police that has a problem. It's like the whole country has a problem, right? And so this is a huge peril. I think there's opportunity though. If you look at, I think Pharmac, for example, is one of the crown jewels of the New Zealand government system. It lets us negotiate, get good drug prices, punch above our weight and all that. And I think centralization gives you an opportunity to get muscular with offshore vendors if need be. I think also if you think about data sovereignty and who controls the systems of government, it's also an opportunity to fix some of those issues. I know you have to play with the world, right? New Zealand's an open trading nation, but we also should make sure that core capable infrastructure is managed and owned by ourselves because that's part of being a sovereign nation. So without looking into the details, I think there's peril and opportunity, and it really depends how it's managed, whether we get to one or the other.
Yeah, look, I think there'll be probably a bit more discussion on this one, over time. Now, onto sort of the global front. One, I guess, story that caught my attention was reading about TV manufacturers getting caught in Texas. So it's the state of Texas that has gone after them now for taking screenshots of
insane.
Across 5 manufacturers. So this come from the Texas Attorney General. Suing 5 manufacturers. So Sony is in there, Samsung, LG, Hisense, and TCL. So, the biggest, names are right there. This also comes after there was a bit of a backlash, I know, in recent weeks around a partnership between Microsoft and LG,
Copilot,
where Copilot's being pushed onto the Copilot app being pushed onto LG TVs without any, direct consent from the owners of the TVs, or even an ability to uninstall the Copilot app, and now we're hearing that they're basically using what's called automated content recognition technology to capture what customers are watching at a given moment, and it's able to, according to the filing, they're able to take screenshots to a second, so every half a second, to understand what a user is watching in real time, and then send that back to the TV manufacturer without any explicit consent from the end user. And of course, TVs aren't just used to watch TV. Some people will be having business meetings on them, Teams meetings. These things get used at all levels of government, business, and so on, right? And people will share their private content onto their TVs. So this definitely, I sort of was somewhat flabbergasted that these names that we trust, the likes of, say, Samsung and LG and Sony, who are really, really big names that have been around for a long time, and you would think, well, these are really trustworthy companies in a general sense, are being pulled up for this. So obviously it hasn't gone to court yet. We don't know exactly what is and isn't true, but it seems like a real shocker to me.
I just think the concept of a smart TV just blows my mind. It's like you go to buy some curtains and the curtain company comes and they install the curtains and you've got them all nicely hung up, and then they leave and there's this guy standing in the corner of your bedroom and you're like, well, who's that guy? Oh, that's Jim. Oh, yeah, he comes with the curtains. He's there just to like help you open and close them. If you don't like anything about the curtains, he'll report back to us. Like, well, who feeds them? Oh, we've got people who feed Jim. He's just going to stand in my bedroom? Yeah. It's like, so that's how I feel about smart TVs. Like, I went to buy one, actually did buy one about 2-3 weeks ago. And the sales guy didn't understand when I said, I do not want a smart TV. Because all their TVs are like smart this, smart that. And he was like, why? And I'm like, well, think about it. Like, it's listening to your conversations. So do I want like something listening to my conversations in my living room? No, I do not. On top of that, these companies, like, you buy a TV for $1,000 or something. So what, their margin's what, $50? Because it's like a high volume, low margin play. So are they going to pay an army of software engineers to update the apps for the next 10 years? No. Like, there's no possible way they can do that. So what that means is it's this unpatched hole into my local network, like, because it's talking. So it's listening to everything I say. It's an unpatched hole. On top of that, you've got the stalker stuff like in Texas, right? Yeah. Which is just insane. And then you've got the AI stuff being forced upon you. It's like, it really is like this dude who comes with your curtains. and then anyway, he said, well, fine, you can turn off the Wi-Fi and then the TV won't connect.
Yeah,
and so
can't communicate outside.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, fine. So I bought a TV and very happy with it and installed it. And then it was kind of funny, like a couple of days ago, my son comes down and he's 8 and he says, Dad, I can't get Netflix to work on the TV. And I said, oh, don't worry about that. I've turned off the Wi-Fi, so the TV won't work. You have to go through the Apple TV. And he said, oh, no, don't worry. I turned the Wi-Fi on, Dad. And so he's like, I'd gone to all this effort to keep it clean, and then my son just put a hole in the system. So anyways, we've had a chat about proper security with him, and it's all good.
Yeah, it is actually, it's a good time, when, children are growing up. There are lots of opportunities to chat through. Oh yeah. The risks of, from a cybersecurity and data privacy perspective, all the varying things. And I remember being in the mall with my son. We were a fair bit younger, and we were in a big chain of something like Woodcourse, and he's like, Dad, they're running Windows 7. This is a cybersecurity problem. I was like, yes,
perfect. Yeah,
go son.
You've succeeded.
So, they do pick things up pretty quick. Yeah. So, I think this will be a really interesting one to watch and to see. Is what Texas have called out actually happening, and if it is, then. Well, kind of regardless of if it is, I think that we need to, step up in New Zealand our data privacy, regulations. Although what we've got is reasonably new, there's not really any significant kind of teeth to the current, regulations. Let's say this is happening in New Zealand. So let's say, everyone listening, if you've got one of those TVs in your home, let's say it is, pushing data out.
Will be.
That's screenshotting. Well, maybe not. But yeah, how would you feel about that? And what would be an appropriate, level to compensate for that? And I think obviously depends in each person's case. If you're just watching normal TV and it's completely anonymized, it doesn't link back to you. But if you've had confidential, family photos, whatever else it is, you've projected confidential stuff onto your TV, and that's got caught up in it. I don't know how you make that right with people. So I'm sort of surprised actually that this particular story hasn't had a whole lot of media attention but we will follow it with
We'll
interest.
see.
Yeah. Waymo and power outages in San Francisco. You followed this one as
Yes.
well. The basic situation is, a blackout in San Francisco. That meant that traffic lights weren't operating in parts of the San Francisco area, and what that led to, in the case of San Francisco, where you've got all these Waymo robotaxis driving around with no drivers, is there were bunches of them just stalling and freezing up. And I remember seeing a Waymo that had got a bit stuck when I was in San Francisco, and trying out a bit of tech on the road there. And I hadn't seen that before. I hadn't seen one get stuck. But this was sort of next level if you looked at some of the videos online. Like, if you've got enough vehicles that are just freezing up, then you create, as you say, gridlock situation, which is it feels like some sort of crazy future, but actually this is the world we're in now. Actually, I remember seeing some footage from a movie that featured a whole lot of Tesla vehicles that were being autonomously controlled, or that had been supposedly autonomously controlled, but they had all, they'd all just stopped, where they were. So I guess this is the world where we're moving into, where these are the sorts of possibilities. Also saw some concerns coming out of the UK, reasonably recently, around vehicles coming from parts of the world that the UK might not be quite so friendly with, and highlighting that those vehicles can be remotely disabled.
Totally.
And so what would be the consequences if, let's just say, China and the UK or US, UK, whoever's making vehicles delivered to the UK market is not getting on so well. An extreme scenario could be, all right, we'll freeze up your fleets of cars, like this, but potentially on a much, much larger scale in the future.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I recently got a home solar system, and all the different components come with apps, and one of the providers could do everything all in one, and the other provider would do different, essentially different companies that focus on different parts of the value chain.
Yeah.
And in the end, I went with that partly for this reason, was just I figured, if all these different systems have to talk to each other, then it means the chance of one system taking it all down, whether it's because there's been some third world war or just because a bug got into the system, you've kind of got some protection. And I think same thing with the Waymos, right? It was traffic lights going out, but it could very easily be a software bug, or it could be a nation state that's grumpy at another nation state, or it could be just any one of a whole bunch of other problems. And if we've put all our eggs into one or two baskets, we become very vulnerable. It doesn't take World War III to trigger that. It can just be human error, which is scary. But it's also, I should say, I've been in the Waymos and they are fantastic. It's definitely an incredible experience. It's just as you rush towards a cliff, the view keeps getting better kind of situations.
I just looked up that movie. It was a 2023 movie, Leave the World Behind, described as an apocalyptic thriller featuring a prominent scene where a fleet of self-driving Tesla vehicles are hacked and forced to crash into each other on a highway, creating a massive roadblock. So, it is kind of odd when you see elements of fiction, become real in one way or another.
I mean, wait till we all have humanoid robots and that happens. That's going to be super creepy.
Yeah, that's...
Too creepy?
That's freaky. But as we're kind of, almost at the end of the year here, there will be an episode actually, it's been pre-recorded for next week and over the break. So if you are wanting to kind of keep updated on the tech front, you will find some good content. But looking back at 2025 and what's been happening in the autonomous vehicle front, because this is I guess a front we don't talk about quite so often these days, but it was certainly a huge fascination for a while when especially when Tesla were promising all the time for a period, which I guess they still are, their autonomous vehicles and robo-taxis, but that just got a little bit long in the tooth because they talked about it for so long and didn't quite deliver.
Yep.
But I mean, this year we have had the full self-drive capability launched in New Zealand. However, those who maybe paid for a vehicle 6 years ago, like myself, because at this stage the FSD, full self-drive sort of supervised software, only works on the latest hardware for New
need
Zealand
all the fancy sensors
at the moment. So there's a little bit of a no-go there, but it is cool that you can try that technology out in New Zealand. You can go and visit Tesla and test drive that tech. So definitely fun to do if you haven't had a go with that. But also continued sort of innovation, I guess, from Kiwis that are involved in this sort of autonomous vehicle world. But before we jump into that, before you were talking, Ben, before we started the stream, around a Kiwi project that goes back quite a few years that I hadn't I certainly don't remember hearing about.
Yeah, no, it was just a shout out, just talking about the history of Waymo, and that came out of something called the DARPA Grand Challenge originally, which was DARPA's Defense Advanced Research Projects. I think it's a US government thing where they put money into prizes for companies to try and solve problems for the military. And this particular one was self-driving cars, and the Waymo team famously came out of Stanford. Their car Stanley successfully drove through, I think it was the Nevada desert, I believe. I might have my desert.
It was quite a big hike that it had to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 170 miles, something like that. And it was, very famously on the second pass through that it successfully did it. I think the first time the car that got furthest was like 10 miles, something like that. But anyway, there was a New Zealand team. They started a company. I was very, 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 very tangentially associated as a student, but full credit to them. They started a company called Inro. That was originally a team that entered the DARPA Grand Challenge, and then Inro was focused on warehouse automation and forklifts. I think it was eventually sold to Crown. A really, really great team, great guys. I think you looked it up and it was around 2007 when they exited. But it's a great example of a Kiwi success story.
Incredible. Goes back 20 years, and most of us had never heard of it. So
they're awesome guys.
That was really cool. Also, some Kiwi kind of connections. So a couple of the big players in the world of autonomous driving have very strong Kiwi connection. So Neuro, who we have an interview with him on the co-founder, Dave Ferguson, on the New Zealand Business Podcast. That'd go back a few years, but really fascinating listen. So co-founder Dave Ferguson. This year his role has changed. He's now co-CEO. They have raised a Series E funding round, $203 million, and currently have a valuation coming in at about $6 billion. So quite an achievement on the funding front, but also in terms of their achievements, they've been partnering with Uber and Lucid on what they're titling a global robo-taxi program. And of course, companies like Uber have more than one partner when it comes to this type of. They've announced California Bay Area as their first market for that program, but we've seen their tech being widely tested, and they've been getting data in varying places as well. I think 200 cities across the US. Their tech testing and training and demonstrations have reached out internationally, so they've got video footage online of the Neuro autonomous technology being used in Tokyo, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff online. They've got a really good this year Neuro Accelerated into the Future 2025 video if you're curious. So yeah, if you Google Neuro NURO, you have a little bit of a look at that, and it sort of goes through some of those highlights. But yeah, really good to see Kiwis deeply involved in that. And Dave Ferguson was also involved in Google's self-driving car for quite a number of years before. I don't know whether it was in the era that it was called Waymo. I think it was probably prior to that. Yeah, very, very, very key talent there. And then we've also got Wave AI, whose CEO and co-founder is Alex Kendall, who's a Kiwi. And Wave AI have announced autonomous taxis for London, and they've been working. I think it was around mid-year. They highlighted a demonstration of hitting 90 cities in 90 days with their autonomous driving technology. So just testing it, in many cities.
Do you think the engineers,
across lots of countries?
I was gonna say, do you think the engineers were asked before the marketing team went live with that, or do you think it was?
Well, that it's a really interesting point. One of the things that I've been noticing lately, and I mean this is it's a long-term trend, is just the difference between a kind of a tech-led company. Mm-hmm. Right, and by that I mean someone that's got all the business nous and so on, but is actually deeply technical, like say Sir Peter Beck from Rocket Lab, and what that type of firm can achieve and how they operate, versus those that are maybe there's less tech expertise. And my understanding is Alex Kendall is pretty switched on on these sort of things technically. So it creates a scenario where it's going to be a bit more than just marketing involved, I'm thinking. Yeah, but they've done some interesting things this year as well, and so just exciting to see what's going on and what's being achieved.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah. Ben, keen to hear a little bit more about your journey and what you've been involved in. We are planning a separate, of a full New Zealand business podcast episode to sort of hear more of your story and the full story of Stretch Sense. So, folks will have to sort of hold on for that one. But maybe you can give us kind of a short version of the Stretch Sense story, and then we can, delve a bit more into other topics on the entrepreneurship and startup front.
Fantastic. Where to start? So I did my PhD at the University of Auckland in the Auckland Bioengineering Institute. And while I was there, myself and some other people in the lab and our professor, we started selling custom high voltage power supplies. And so this was kind of a random place to start, actually, but we had been going to conferences and showing off prototypes to people. And these prototypes required high voltage power supplies. The systems we work with, artificial muscles, required high voltages. And so people saw that and they started saying, hey, could you make these supplies for us? And so that was totally market-led, totally surprising. We didn't set out to become high voltage power supply salesmen, but that's what happened. And so for the next sort of 3 years, from 2009 through to 2012, we sold about $500,000 of these things, these little desktop 5,000 volt power supplies, plus a few like projects on the side of it.
And why was there that demand? What was pushing the demand?
Because there were lots of people interested in the technology. Artificial muscles, they're basically like rubber bands that would expand or contract when you applied a voltage. So you could make like Iron Man power suits or smart prosthetics or soft robots. That was the dream, and that is the goal of that research space. But the problem is that if you can't actually make a working device that operates, it's useless. Like, it's academically useless. And so what we became very good at was taking like, okay, here's this technology, but how do we make it useful? And that typically involved a combination of things, but custom high voltage electronics was one of them. And then of course, actually designing and working with soft systems was another. And so, yeah, people found like around the world they were very good maybe at the soft materials part, but they couldn't do the electronics. And so they just started buying from us and we got a reputation. It was all supported by the university at the time, so we had lots of support from the University of Auckland and Uni Services, so shout out to them, and also the ABI who gave us space and let us use equipment and all that kind of stuff. So we were well supported by the environment that we were in. And we got a taste for it, honestly. It's very satisfying to ship a product to someone because you're solving their problem. And when they say thank you, because you've completely unblocked their research or you're enabling them to make a new product or do something great, and then they give you money as well as saying thank you, it's kind of addictive. And so we wanted to set up a business. StretchSense kind of originally we were going to make a generation energy harvesting company, but we saw more demand from people that wanted to sense soft movement of the human form. So basically measuring how people move, how objects interact with people. And so we set the company up focused on that application. It was also low voltage. So it's kind of funny because we built all this capability in high voltage electronics and then jettisoned it all to go after low voltage sensing systems.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the company. Again, we're going to talk more later, but StretchSense, we went on the full startup journey. So we built a business selling soft stretchable sensor development kits to companies in sports and fitness and consumer electronics and virtual reality industries, basically anyone who wanted to measure and precisely digitize how a human moved. The company went through multiple rounds of funding. We had some big upsets along the way. We had like a big contract with a Japanese strategic investor fall over around 2009. So that was a pretty hard period of the company's existence when had to lay off a lot of people, which really sucked. So yeah, full ups and downs. But then recapitalized the business. It was bought out of administration by GD1, Global from Day One. And a new company was formed and went after. So we'd actually learned some lessons along the way. One of them was to try and rather be a component business to focus on the end user as much as possible and try and actually deliver something where you get to talk to the person who's actually using the product as opposed to, say, selling to a business that wants to make a product. So we went after the movie and games industry, specifically helping actors digitize their movements of their hands, because hands turns out to be a really great application of the sensor technology. So kind of my claim to fame there is that Snoop Dogg's worn our gloves that we made, which is pretty cool. So there's a music video you can watch of Snoop Dogg. It's like a Larry Page homage, which is pretty cool. I stepped down a couple of years ago from being CEO, but I'm still on the board as a director. And today the company is really focused on VR training. So basically helping solve the global retraining crisis because of globalization, AI, just generally the rapid pace of technology, people having to learn new skills really, really fast. And so turned out that all our experience with soft sensing and all our experience with digitizing human body motion for the movie industry is absolutely perfect for letting people be present inside virtual worlds. So basically reach out, touch, interact with virtual environments, and those are perfect for training people on how to use new fly vehicles, use equipment, run plant, manage logistics, things like that. So got a really great CEO in there, great sales team focused on going after that.
That's fantastic. And so with this book you're writing,
yes,
The Bottom of the Cliff,
yes,
is this sort of essentially kind of wrapping up all the different learnings you've had from your own business and observing and interacting with others in the field?
Yes, sort of. So it's I should say off the bat it's fiction, but maybe I should start somewhere a little differently, which is why does the world need another book for entrepreneurs? That's probably a good place to start. And I kind of have three observations when I look at the literature out there. So the first is most books for entrepreneurs focus on best practice. So they say, here's my story, here's what went wrong, or maybe I studied some other people and here's what went wrong. Here's the lessons I learned from it, and then here's my plan that you can follow so that you don't make the mistakes I did and you succeed, right? That's best practice. Here's best practice. So the problem with best practice is that real business people, real founders, real entrepreneurs will make horrible mistakes. You just make horrible mistakes. And then eventually everything goes wrong because of those mistakes. And the problem is, in that moment, being told what you should have done differently 18 months ago is too late.
Yeah.
It's not wrong, but it's too late, right? Like, if you have to lay off most of your team because you've run out of money and lost the faith of investors and everything's gone wrong, being told that you shouldn't be in that situation and that 2 years ago you made some bad business decisions is just too late, right? So that's kind of one thing. Best practice is too late. You need to deal with situations as they are, where they are. My second kind of core observation is most advice for entrepreneurs isn't from the entrepreneur's corner. It tends to be written from either the perspective of professional investors. And professional investors, nothing wrong with professional investors, but they're trying to optimize value across a portfolio. So they're trying to create value across 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 companies, whereas you're trying to optimize value in a single company. And the decisions you would make, the risk profile that you would take, and the investments in time and effort are just different. It's different running a good company on its own from running a company in a portfolio. And so there's nothing wrong with being a professional investor, but if you as a founder don't realize that perspective and where they're coming from, you're going to run aground. You're going to have problems. And the other variant of not being in the entrepreneur's corner is a lot of it's written by successful founders, people who have succeeded, they've exited, they've retired, what have you, and they go and whitewash history. They go and tell the story that they want to have told. And so that's kind of the second thing. And then the third thing is running a business for the first time is this profoundly challenging emotional journey. Like the level of professional mental development that you go through, going from nobody to running a team, all the ups and downs, all that's huge. And most books out there either focus on the emotional mental health part or they ignore it. But real problems are at the synthesis of the two. Real problems are this complicated mess of feelings and emotions and people and leadership and actual business problems and maths and logic. It's just this mess. And so anyway, I wanted to write a book that addressed those three problems. It explores tough situations that occur all the time in startups, but from the perspective of where you are as you are, so no preaching to you about best practice. It's in your corner, so it recognizes your personal risk profile, what you're trying to achieve as the founder, and it doesn't shy away from the complicated, tangled mess of emotional problems and just like business problems that face founders. So.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. How far away are you thinking until it's?
I don't know.
Is it a 2026?
I think so.
thing?
Yeah. So I'm there's a wait list. So thank you. bottomofthecliffbook.com. So you can go. Anyone can check that out. I've written a first draft and I'm about half the way through the rewrite now. So I hope middle of this coming year.
Yeah. That's great. Oh, just one thing I'll flip back to on that last topic. We were talking about Wave AI. The 90 cities was earlier on in the year. They actually expanded that to 500.
Fantastic.
And so that was kind of their latest achievement. And they've done a bit of a wrap up for the year blog post as well, talking around training data and all sorts of fascinating insights. So I know there'll be a few people here that would quite like to sort of delve down these rabbit holes a little bit more. And so go and have a look at .ai website or the Neuro site to learn a little bit more about how they're going. And I know, some listeners will probably be investing in some of the companies that you can invest in, and will be curious to understand the broader landscape. So it might be useful.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Well, that's us for this episode. It's been really great to have you, join the podcast for the first time,
fun.
Ben. I know it's probably quite a few years since we first met, and I came out and visited you at Stretch Sense and so on. Certainly the show runs a bit more smoothly in terms of booking guests and coordinating things, thanks to having some sponsors, having Joe Allen, our amazing producer. We're definitely headed in the right direction. And we'll look forward to scheduling something in and having a broader chat.
Sounds great.
In 2026. So thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, a big thank you to those show partners, to Workday, Gorilla Technology, Spark, 2 Degrees and 1NZ for their support. And, of course, another reminder, please complete our survey if you haven't already, nztechpodcast.com/survey. You can do it in 60 seconds, or you can spend a bit more time on it, but it will help us improve the show. And there's some really, really cool giveaways in there as well. So thank you to Motorola, Logitech, and 1NZ for prizes that they've shared. And that will be wrapping up, I think, early in the new year. Now's probably your best chance to get in. And a reminder that most listeners don't get round to doing this, so the odds are actually pretty good if you fill it out. So, yeah, excellent. All right, thanks everyone. Don't miss out on those episodes that'll be running through the break as well. But we'll be back into live episodes the second week of January. Good stuff, and thank you, Ben, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.